Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, August 20th, 2025. Congressional redistricting battle in the two most populous states moves from debate to votes. In Texas, Republicans seeking to gain 5 more U.S. House seats for their party. And in California, the exact opposite, Democrats with a new map favoring their party in 5 more seats. We'll hear debate from the Texas House of Representatives and from California Governor Gavin Newsom. Vice President JD Vance travels to Union Station in Washington, D.C. to visit with and thank National Guard troops that President Trump has called up to deal with what he says is an out-of-control crime and homeless problem in the city. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is asked about the Justice Department reportedly investigating whether D.C. manipulated crime stats so they would appear lower than they really are. President Donald Trump calls on a member of the Federal Reserve Board, Lisa Cook, to resign after allegations she committed mortgage fraud. North Carolina Governor Josh Stein tells residents of his state to take the threat of Hurricane Erin seriously, even though it is not expected to make landfall. And in foreign affairs, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Russia needs to be involved in developing Ukrainian security guarantees as part of a peace agreement to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. Associated Press writing from Austin, Texas, the Republican-controlled Texas House of Representatives on Wednesday kicked off a heated debate over a new congressional map creating 5 new potential GOP seats that is expected to pass the chamber later in the day as part of a growing national redistricting battle. The plan is a result of prodding by President Donald Trump, eager to stave off a midterm defeat that would deprive his party of control of the House of Representatives. Texas Democratic lawmakers delayed a vote for 15 days by leaving the state in protest, depriving the House of enough members to do business. State Representative Todd Hunter, who wrote the legislation formally creating the new map, noted that the U.S. Supreme Court has allowed politicians to redraw districts for nakedly partisan purposes. That was from Associated Press. Here is part of the debate. On the Texas House floor in Austin, Representative Barbara Gervin Hawkins, a Democrat, questioning Todd Hunter.
We weren't asked any questions and or engaged in the process at all. Do you believe that's fair?
Are you talking about you, or are you talking about others?
I'm talking about the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, who potentially will lose 2 seats. Okay. I'm talking about an interest group that I thought had a role, an important role in this process.
You absolutely did. And Representative, you and I know each other, but you left 17 to 18 days. You left 17 to 18 days. You could have sat with me. You left 7 to 18 days leaving this state. My view, the public could have been involved. The whole caucus could have been involved. All 150 people could have been involved.
With all due respect,
I'm not finished.
Now let me get
You're
finished.
not letting me talk. You're the back mic. You ask the question. I get to talk. You and I disagree.
I disagree that the public had proper input.
Ma'am, you will not let me talk.
Members, please make sure you're not talking over one another so y'all can actually debate.
Now, since I'm not sure what this has to do with the amendment that we're talking about.
It has everything to do with the amendment.
It does not. But you want to continue. You and I disagree.
July 24th,
you'd still
no
never
maps. I'm sorry, Representative
Can
Hunter.
I finish my answer?
Yes, you can. Please do that, sir.
So for 17 to 18 days, you left. Now you're getting on the microphone saying, why didn't I involve you? Well, I wasn't going across state lines to find you. I was here.
I was here before then.
Hold it, let me finish. You want to be fair, let me finish. You opened up the questions. You own the walkout. You said you did that. But don't come into this body and say we didn't include you. You left us for 18 days, and that's wrong. Now,
members,
they applauded my opponent a while ago, so please give me equal treatment.
So, Representative Hunter, thank you for laying out that. But what you didn't lay out, and I hope you will let me finish responding or answering my question, on July 24th, there was a public hearing in Austin, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
On July 26th, there was a public hearing in Houston, correct?
That's Saturday, yes.
And on July 28th, there was a hearing in Arlington, Texas, correct?
That evening in Arlington.
Okay, when did the maps drop?
I believe the maps were filed Wednesday.
So Wednesday, and then you had a hearing the next day with people who could not weigh in on a yay or a nay. It's my understanding those maps were not released until after the public hearings. Is that true or false?
Well, you're wrong, because the hearing was Friday, not Thursday.
We had several hearings before the maps were dropped. Would you agree with that?
Ma'am, you just said the map was dropped and then we heard it. The fact is, it was filed that Wednesday. The hearing was Friday. Let's get the specifics down. And I've answered everything to you in committee that I'm answering here. Tuesday, after the Arlington hearing, the chairman of the committee asked me if I would present the bill to this body, which I said yes. Number two, I did not see or get the information till that Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we filed the bill.
Representative Hunter, let's be clear. There were public hearings held without any maps. Is that true?
Yes.
Just before the bill vote out, those maps were dropped at that time, correct? Because it was voted out on that Saturday morning.
The bill was voted on
Saturday morning. Just the other day, we had a hearing where you changed some additional districts.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Part of the Texas House of Representatives debate, Barbara Gervin Hawkins, a Democrat, questioning Todd Hunter, a Republican, in Austin, Texas. Returning to the Associated Press article about this debate, the Texas State Senate, also controlled by Republicans, needs to also pass the map, and GOP Governor Greg Abbott must sign it before they become official. The House debate was expected to be the lengthiest and greatest obstacle to the Republican push, but both parties expected the legislation to ultimately pass, given the GOP's significant majority in the chamber. Democrats said they were preparing to challenge the new map in court. That was from Associated Press. California's state assembly and Senate also moving this week to pass a redistricting map drawn by the state's Democratic majority, designed to gain Democrats 5 more U.S. House seats in that state, exactly offsetting what the Republicans are doing in Texas. Governor Gavin Newsom, Democrat of California, held an online news conference today with the Democratic National Committee Chair Ken Martin and others. The governor tying the redistricting fight to what he saw as President Donald Trump's moves towards authoritarianism in many areas.
I said it a few months ago. It's pretty self-evident now. We talked about the National Guard. I said this is a preview of things to come. I'll remind everybody needs to be reminded of this. Donald Trump not only federalized 4,000 National Guard, but he sent 700 active military. The United States Marines, not overseas. He never sent anyone overseas in his entire first term. He sent them to an American city, the United States of America. We still have federalized National Guard. Interestingly, and Senator and Mr. Chair, assigned through Election Day. Is that coincidental? Through Election Day? Don't think for a second that's a preview, National Guard, of things to come, that ICE and Border Patrol won't be showing up at a voting booth, a polling place this November. I mean, this is, I know we talk about authoritarianism, and I know it turns some people off, but at least we can submit it. This is encroaching authoritarianism. Nothing about this is normal. And so we're not going to act as if anything is normal any longer. Yes, we'll fight fire with fire. Yes, we will push back. It's not about whether we play hardball anymore. It's about how we play hardball. And California has your back. And I appreciate you, Nicole. We have your back. Everything you're doing today, it's fire and fury. It won't signify anything, because our legislature is going to come back today and they're going to get the job done tomorrow. And we're going to go in front of the voters. We'll be back in front of the voters in the most transparent and democratic way, with the maps in front of the voters to make a determination of whether or not they want to maintain those enduring principles and values that define this country for the last 249 years. Co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, the rule of law, not the rule of Don. That's what this is about. It's about the rule of Don versus the rule of law. Make no mistake about it. And every reporter, I don't care if you're sitting there on Fox excusing him every single night, or Newsmax, or one in New, he's coming for you next. You're one utterance away.
California Governor Gavin Newsom in an online call today talking about the redistricting effort in his state and also what's happening in Texas. One of the reporter's questions to him was about his press office's recent tweets. As Newsweek writes, Governor Newsom has received a significant bump in the polls after launching a barrage of sharp attacks on President Donald Trump on social media, according to a new survey. In recent weeks, the governor's press office has transformed its social media presence into a barrage of all-caps taunts, pop culture spoofs, and AI-generated memes mocking the president's style, even as it pushes back on Republican policies. That was from Newsweek. Here's the question to the governor.
First question is for Governor Newsom. It's from Orrin Oppenheim of ABC News. He says, can you talk about your social media strategy and why you are echoing President Donald Trump's tone? Do you think other Democrats should follow?
People need to do what they, I'm not here to offer any advice. I'm here to iterate in the spirit of Senator Booker. There's a reason we've been friends for decades, and it's an actual real term in this case. Friends, not political friends, but friends for decades, is his willingness to try new things, to iterate. And I think this moment requires it. And if nothing else, we've called out the absurdity of the normalization of Donald Trump. I mean, you can't make it up. And when Fox is sitting there, so concerned about these tweets in all caps, they've missed the entire point, haven't they, of what we're pushing back and what we're doing. The fact that people are paying a little bit more attention. Maybe they should be paying attention what the President of the United States of America is modeling every single day. Nothing about this, everybody, is normal. Nothing about this is normal, and it needs to be called out.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, during a virtual news conference today. Two others on the call, the Texas State Representative Nicole Collier and U.S. Senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker, both Democrats. Collier has been living in the U.S. House chamber in Austin, Texas, protesting the requirement from the Republican majority in the House that Democrats who leave have a police escort to ensure they return and prevent a repeat of what happened the past 2 weeks when many Democrats went to Illinois to deny a quorum in Texas to pass the new redistricting maps. Collier was on this call from a bathroom when she interrupted and said she's been told she can't do that. You're also going to hear from Senator Booker.
Sorry, I have to leave. They said it's a felony for me to do this. Apparently, I can't be on the floor or in the bathroom. Well, you told me I was only allowed to be here in the bathroom. No, hang on. Bye, everybody. I've got to go.
Hey, that is outrageous. And first of all, let me tell you something. Representative Collier in the bathroom has more dignity than Donald Trump in the Oval Office.
There you go.
That is outrageous. What they're trying to do right there is silence an American leader, silence a Black woman. And that is outrageous. And I hope everybody took note of that. The fact that she can't even let her voice be heard is freaking outrageous.
It is.
And this is what we're fighting for here. This is ultimately what this is about. What we just witnessed, them trying to shut her down and say it's illegal for her to be in the bathroom and on this call. This is the lengths that they're going to in Texas to try to bring about a system so unjust and so unjustifiable that they are going to try to silence those leaders from being heard and speaking out. I hope I hope people felt what just happened like I did, because I've watched for too long in this country as women like her, as they come after people like her to try to silence her, to try to silence them. But no more. This is not going to happen. We're not going to let this happen.
Senator Cory Booker, Democrat from New Jersey, on a virtual call with the California Governor Gavin Newsom and the DNC Chair Ken Martin and Texas State Representative Nicole Collier, a Democrat. This is Washington Today. Story from ABC News. As President Donald Trump's deployment of National Guard troops continued, protesters lashed out at 3 of his top officials who took time for a photo op with the Guardsmen on Wednesday in Washington, D.C.'s Union Station. Protesters booed and jeered Vice President JD Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller as they came to the station, located blocks from the U.S. Capitol, to thank the troops. Vance and Miller dismissed the jeers of the protesters which drowned out their press gaggle calling them crazy and communists. That was from ABC News. Here are some of the reporters' questions to the Vice President and the Defense Secretary.
Mr. Vice President, why are troops stationed here at Union Station on the National Mall instead of areas in D.C. where crime is statistically highest?
Well, if you've ever been to Union Station in the last few years with your family, you know that crime is actually extremely high right here in Union Station. You have vagrants, you have drug addicts, you have the chronically homeless, you have the mentally ill who harass, who threaten violence, who attack families, and they've done it for far too long. This should be a monument to American greatness. This should be a place where you can come and share a meal or go shopping with your family. It should not be a place where parents of small children are afraid to bring them because, to Stephen's point, we have empowered criminals over the people who actually need public safety in this city. So I think Union Station is a great example of what's possible when you actually have the political willpower to bring law and order and common decency back to the public spaces of the United States of America. So many Americans live in cities. They occupy these spaces. They know how unsafe they are, and they would love to be able to just live their life in places like Union Station without violent criminals making it impossible. We have changed so much in 9 days, and I thought it important to highlight how great of a space this could be, how easy it could be to actually enjoy something like Union Station if you just had politicians who stopped prioritizing violent criminals over the public citizens who deserve public safety in their own communities.
And to add to that real quick, we talked to a first responder before we came up here, said this is their #1 call location is Union Station for first responders. So it's not as if this is insignificant. In many ways, this is part of the epicenter. And we go to that and return it to the safe location that it should be. It also frees up resources around the city. And you've seen a majority of the arrests happening in a lot of those places that need help.
That's right. Well, look, we'll ultimately let the President of the United States determine where we are after 30 days of this emergency order. I think that we're going to make a lot of progress over the next 20 days. I think that we're 9 days into this thing. But if the President of the United States thinks that he has to extend this order to ensure that people have access to public safety, then that's exactly what he'll do. If he thinks he doesn't have to do that, obviously he'll make that determination. But what we're going to do is try to empower these guys to do as good of a job as possible to bring public safety and order back to Washington, D.C. This is the national, cultural, and political capital of the world's greatest nation, and you talk to people, black, brown, white, so many of them are afraid to bring their kids into its public spaces. It's a shame. It's a blight. It actually should make every American ashamed that the world's leading superpower, our national capital, was unsafe for families to walk around at night. That is a disgrace. We don't think that it's acceptable, and thank God we have the presidential leadership to change it, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. Well, I think that crime statistics all over our country were massively underreported because a lot of people would pick up the phone, they'd call somebody, they'd try to get help, and nobody would show up. If you look at wait times, at 911 response times all across our country, but certainly in Washington, D.C., they were way too long. And that wasn't because of the D.C. police. That was because there was too much crime and too few law enforcement agents on the street to bring order and decency to this city. You talk to these guys. I talked to 3 police officers earlier. I've talked to the National Guard. They are so happy that they've been empowered to do their job, which is to make American streets safe for American citizens. And I think that empowerment is going to keep on going until we make America, and D.C. in particular, a safe place.
Vice President JD Vance and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at Union Station in Washington, D.C. Also with them, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. They were there to visit and thank National Guard troops deployed by President Donald Trump. You heard some protesters in the background. Story from CNN. The Trump Justice Department is investigating whether Washington, D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department manipulated crime data, according to 2 sources. The investigation, which is being run by the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., is an escalation in the city's battle against a federal law enforcement takeover from the Trump administration. President Donald Trump appeared to confirm the probe in a social media post, writing that D.C. gave fake crime numbers in order to create a false illusion of safety. This is a very bad and dangerous thing to do, and they are under serious investigation for so doing. reporting by CNN. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, a Democrat, was asked about this today. And you'll also hear from the D.C. Police Chief, Pamela Smith.
Would you respond to the Justice Department investigation into whether the Metropolitan Police Department allegedly manipulated crime stat data?
I'm happy to respond, and I'll just say this. Whatever questions were asked or inquiry, we will respond, and we will cooperate with any investigation. We know that crime has gone down in our city, and it has gone down precipitously over the last 2 years because of a lot of hard work, changes to our public safety ecosystem, including changes to the law. And we know that those facts don't comport to what some people are saying, but those are the facts. So any questions about data from DOJ, we will happily answer. Yep.
A follow-up to that question, in regards to the allegations, there also, or people against your office and what's being done are talking about the fact that in May, you also did have a commander who was placed on administrative leave on similar suspicions. That was done in May. Can you update us on that investigation? And I'll ask another question after that.
I don't really have an update to that investigation, but I will say that was an investigation initiated by the chief, and I'm not sure if it's concluded, but I'll ask the chief to talk about that.
So I'll start by saying that it was an investigation that was initiated by me, and I'll close by saying we have not yet completely finalized the investigation. As most of you know, we don't talk about open investigations until it's complete.
Washington, D.C. Police Chief Pamela Smith and Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser answering reporters' questions today. It was during a visit to a city high school as the new school year is beginning. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi posting on X 66 arrests yesterday and 8 illegal firearms seized. One arrest was a warrant on a juvenile for armed robbery in Washington, D.C. Thank you to our Canine Red and all the men and women who continue to work hard so that Americans can feel safe in the nation's capital. Bondi included a photo of herself, the dog, and men in camouflage, their faces obscured. Mayor Bowser was also asked today about the post on Tuesday by the U.S. Marshals Service that read, "In the effort to #make D.C. safe again, the U.S. Marshals announce a $500 reward for tips that lead to an arrest in Washington, D.C."
Reaction to the Attorney General tweeted out this morning that the U.S. Marshal Service is now offering $500 to anyone who gives information that leads to an arrest in the district. Do you have any reaction to that?
I don't have a reaction. We have a rewards program here for information that leads to prosecutions in certain crimes, and we have a very active program, and that has worked.
Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. President Donald Trump has said that D.C. would be a model for his administration's anti-crime efforts in other cities, and one of those cities he has mentioned is Baltimore. Tuesday night, Maryland Governor Wes Moore, a Democrat, spoke about the possibility of the president activating the National Guard in his state for that purpose. Governor Moore was at Politics and Prose bookstore in Washington.
The only uniform the president has ever worn is a Brooks Brothers suit. So I said, as someone who's actually worn the uniform of this country, let me explain to you how this works. How this works is that we are trained to fight and win our nation's wars. That's how we were trained, right? Our National Guard are trained to make sure that we can actually address moments of crisis, moments of tragedy inside of our states under the jurisdiction and under the authority of the state's commander-in-chief. Right? And I have had to activate members of the Maryland National Guard since I've been the governor, but it's also a duty that carries a significant amount of weight and soberness to it. Because I will not deploy these remarkable men and women for no reason, and definitely not for a publicity stunt. That when we are putting them in harm's way, we have to understand the weight that decision should carry. And so this concept that we are going to put them out there to do municipal policing operations, which they are not trained for. My National Guard's not trained to do municipal policing. And he knows that. And that is what is so unbelievably damaging about this decision and this racket that is then that he's asking these men and women to do on behalf of quote unquote public safety.
Maryland Governor Wes Moore, a Democrat at Politics and Prose bookstore in Washington Tuesday night. He was a captain in the U.S. Army 82nd Airborne Division. NBC News writing that federal prosecutors in Washington were instructed not to seek felony charges against people carrying rifles or shotguns in the city. The U.S. Attorney's Office confirmed to NBC News it marks a dramatic shift from previous policy. The change by U.S. Attorney for D.C. Jeanine Pirro comes as the Trump administration sends hundreds of federal agents into streets to crack down on crime and enforce immigration laws. Pirro said in a statement, criminal culpability is not determined by the instruments people employ, but by the intent and conduct of the actor. Crimes are intentional acts and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent by my office, regardless of what instruments of criminality are used. My job is to keep this city, its citizens, its businesses, and its visitors safe from harm, and I will do that to the fullest extent of the law. Reporting by NBC News. Congressman Gregory Meeks, Democrat from New York, writing on X today, hands off our history. The ugly stain of slavery is part of American history. We must acknowledge our dark past to have a brighter future. He, quote, tweeted a Truth Social post from President Donald Trump from Tuesday that read, "The Smithsonian is out of control, where everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, and how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been. Nothing about success, nothing about brightness, nothing about the future. We are not going to allow this to happen, and I've instructed my attorneys to go through the museums and start the exact same process that has been done with colleges and universities where tremendous progress has been made." That's the post on Tuesday from President Trump. Today, Lindsay Halligan, special assistant to the president, was on Fox News.
So like just about every other country in the world, the United States has got a checkered past. I mean, what should we do in terms of our museum? Should we ignore that? Should that be massaged in a certain way to make it less significant? I mean, some of the worst episodes in our history were formative experiences that led us to where we are today, and those typically are reflected in museums.
Yep, I think the fact that we had our country was involved in slavery is awful. No one thinks otherwise. But what I saw when I was going through the museums personally was an overemphasis on slavery, and I think there should be more of an overemphasis on how far we've come since slavery. Our country is a country of progress, and it's the greatest country in the world, and we should be able to take our kids, our students through the Smithsonian and feel proud when we leave. There's a lot of history to our country, both positive and negative, but we need to keep moving forward. We can't just keep focusing on the negative. All it does is divide us, and we really need to unite the country and focus on all the positive as we approach America's 250th birthday.
Lindsay Halligan, special assistant to President Trump, on Fox News. Associated Press reporting that the White House sent a letter Tuesday to Smithsonian Institution Secretary Lonnie Bunch III laying out the review of Smithsonian museums and exhibitions, quote, to ensure alignment with the president's directive to celebrate American exceptionalism, remove divisive or partisan narratives, and restore confidence in our shared cultural institutions. The Smithsonian said it remained committed to scholarly excellence, rigorous research, and the accurate factual presentation of history. And we are reviewing the letter with this commitment in mind and will continue to collaborate constructively with the White House, Congress, and our governing board of regents. That reporting from AP. This is Washington Today. Another AP story. President Donald Trump on Wednesday called on Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook to resign after a member of his administration accused Cook of committing mortgage fraud, the latest example of the Trump administration's efforts to gain control over the central bank. Bill Pulte, director of the agency that oversees mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, urged the Justice Department to investigate Cook, who was appointed to the Fed's governing board by former President Joe Biden in 2022. She was reappointed the following year to a term that lasts until 2038, the longest remaining term among the 7 governors. That was from the AP article. Bill Pulte was on CNBC today.
We refer people every day criminally for mortgage fraud, and no one is above the law, and in this case it happens to be a Fed governor, and I have an obligation to do something about it. So when we received a tip, this is what we discovered, and it's very unfortunate because, a Fed governor is supposed to understand economic harm of mortgage fraud. The Fed has written all about the economic harm of mortgage fraud, in particular occupancy fraud, and here she is allegedly committing mortgage fraud. So I think it's a big issue. I don't think it's going away. I think she will have to resign, or I think she will be fired.
Bill Pulte, director of the FHFA on CNBC today. Again, from the AP article, Pulte, in a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, alleged that Cook claimed 2 homes as her principal residences in 2021 to fraudulently obtain better mortgage lending terms. On June 18th of that year, she purchased a home in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and then 2 weeks later bought a condo in Atlanta, Georgia, the letter said. Pulte also charged that Cook has listed her condo in Atlanta for rent. Mortgages for homes used as principal residences typically carry lower interest rates than properties that are purchased to rent, the letter said. That was from AP. Bill Pulte was asked during the CNBC interview if this has anything to do with the president's repeated calls to the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates.
Director Pulte, you can't ignore the fact that you have been a very aggressive critic of the Federal Reserve. And clearly so has the president, and he does have a policy agenda here.
Well, we can talk about policy and politics on a separate matter, but as it pertains to the regulation side of things, that's where my focus is as it pertains to that. If you want to talk about politics and interest rates, we can do that. But this, to me, is a very clear case, in my view, of mortgage fraud. It's just black and white. It's their signatures. I sent it to you guys and your producers. I understand you didn't want to put it up, but, anybody can go look at these public documents. Washtenaw County, Michigan, or Fulton County, Georgia. They're there. People can see it. And, in fact, our referral letter is based on publicly available information. So, there's no funny business here. This is straightforward stuff. And if you commit mortgage fraud, especially in black and white, you will be prosecuted.
Bill Pulte, director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency on CNBC. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, quote, tweeting a headline on this story from the Wall Street Journal and adding, "Trump is a liar. Lisa Cook, stand tough and don't let Trump intimidate you." In a story from NBC News, President Trump has purchased at least $103 million worth of corporate and municipal bonds since taking office in January, according to new filings from the Office of Government Ethics. The active trading by a president of the United States is unprecedented and puts Trump in a direct position to benefit or lose out if any of the entities that own the bonds he's purchased succeed or fail. It's also another example of Trump pursuing business endeavors and transactions to increase his wealth while serving in office. That was reporting by NBC News. Wall Street today, the Dow up 16, NASDAQ down 142, S&P down 15. Washington today continues in a moment.
Who first showed you democracy in action? A teacher, neighbor, community leader? Mine was my middle school social studies teacher, Mrs. Carlson. Honor that person and help power C-SPAN's America 250, an 18-month ad-free celebration of our nation's story. Give $25 or more by August 31st at cspan.org/donate to add your democracy hero to our online wall. We'll thank you with a Democracy Unfiltered decal. Your gift keeps these stories alive. Donate today at cspan.org/donate. Thank you.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Hurricane Erin threatened North Carolina with coastal flooding and strong winds, begins an NBC News article. As the large storm moved on a projected path up the Atlantic Ocean, officials said Wednesday, the hurricane isn't expected to make landfall in the U.S., but evacuation orders were issued for parts of the state's Outer Banks, as the East Coast was warned of life-threatening surf and rip currents. Erin, the first Atlantic hurricane of 2025, was a Category 2 storm Wednesday as it churned over the Atlantic north of the Caribbean. It exploded to a Category 5 on Saturday before being downgraded as its strength fluctuated in recent days. It's forecast to retain hurricane strength into the weekend. That was from CBS News. North Carolina Governor Josh Stein, a Democrat, spoke at a news conference at the Emergency Operations Center in the capital city of Raleigh.
Hurricane Erin is currently a Category 2 hurricane that will likely strengthen over the course of the day today. The storm remains dangerous and is already impacting lots of people here in North Carolina. Folks on the coast need to take care. Based on the current forecast, we are anticipating coastal flooding from massive waves, tropical storm force winds, and tidal and storm surge for much of the state shoreline, especially the Outer Banks from this evening through Thursday. Life-threatening rip currents for most of the week. No one should be in the ocean. And extensive beach erosion along much of the coast. Local states of emergency have been declared in Currituck County, Dare County, and Hyde County. Mandatory evacuations are in place for Ocracoke and Hatteras Islands. If you are under an evacuation order, take action now before it's too late. You can find shelter at the state-operated disaster shelter located at 113 Wilcox Street in Warrenton, North Carolina. Pets are allowed at the shelter. I want to thank Warren County Emergency Management for hosting the shelter guests and the General Assembly for helping to fund it. Yesterday, I declared a state of emergency across North Carolina to facilitate our emergency response and to keep you safe. This statewide state of emergency enables us to send critical resources from across the state and around the country to respond. We've activated a cross-agency storm response that includes the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Transportation, the North Carolina National Guard, the State Highway Patrol, and many local partners. Our state emergency response team stands ready to quickly and decisively respond to any needs along the coast.
Governor Josh Stein, Democrat from North Carolina, at a news conference today in Raleigh. There's a CNBC article. The Trump administration is quickly reshaping the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, in ways that carry vast implications for state and local governments. We're going to give out less money. We're going to give it out directly. It'll be from the president's office, President Donald Trump said at a press conference June 11th. The agency is responsible for coordinating response and recovery in disasters that range from floods to wildfires to terrorist attacks. The agency reported a total budget authority of $60 billion in fiscal 2025. Federal spending on disaster relief often draws supplemental appropriations from Congress. That was the CNBC article today. North Carolina Governor Josh Stein was asked about his administration's interactions with the federal government as Hurricane Erin approaches. And you're also going to hear an answer from the state's Director of Emergency Management, William Ray.
Brandon Kingdollar from NC Newsline. I wanted to ask whether what you'd heard from the federal government so far in preparing for Hurricane Erin. Have you gotten any indication that you'll get maybe more cooperation from them than with other storms?
In terms of the federal response, the nature of this storm is such that we haven't needed to call upon those resources to respond to the immediate aftermath of the storm. I'll have the director come forward and talk about his conversations with the Coast Guard and the EPA and others. We don't know what the extent of the damage is going to be. If it ends up being substantial, then at that point, we're going to have to reach out to the federal government to help us with the recovery, and we just have to wait and see. I'm hopeful that they will respond favorably.
Okay, thank you.
And why don't you talk about your response to the federal government?
Thank you, sir. So I think just in follow-up, I think a couple of things. We have talked to FEMA leadership over the last couple of days daily about just impacts, what we're planning on, anticipated gaps or barriers, and what we may need. And so I think have very good open dialogue with senior FEMA leadership right now if there should be a need, as well as out of our regional headquarters that's based in Atlanta. At this point, as the governor said, I think we're not anticipating significant federal resources to support response. I think as we move through the event, we will continue to reassess that. I think it's also important to note that here in North Carolina, and I think you've heard us talk about this before, we have what's called a FEMA integration team. So we actually have a small team from FEMA across their different parts of their agency that are embedded here with our team every single day. We work alongside with them, so they are here daily working with us. We also have some specialists from the National Hurricane Center that are also embedded with our weather team day to day. I think as the governor mentioned, I think one of the areas we are looking at that often impacts coastal events is when we see some of the coordination around abandoned vessels or derelict vessels, anything that could lead to hazardous materials being in waterways. And those are conversations we've been having over the course of this week with the various federal agencies, so EPA, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Coast Guard, on how we, one, support life safety missions in those impacted areas, but also have the right federal resources postured should we need it to deal with some of the infrastructure impacts there.
William Ray is the North Carolina Director of Emergency Management at a news conference with the Governor Josh Stein in Raleigh. WCNC-TV in Raleigh writes that the federal government has for months been holding up hundreds of millions of dollars in Hurricane Helene aid for North Carolina, while also running behind schedule on millions more in disaster preparedness grants for the 2025 hurricane season, which is already underway. Now the funds are flowing slowly, following letters from Governor Josh Stein to federal officials, who on Tuesday told North Carolina they have approved the distribution of tens of millions of dollars in Helene relief aid. That represents some, but not all, of the state's request. That was from WCNC-TV. Recorded sounds of screeching monkeys played outside the Health and Human Services Department in Washington, D.C., next to people in hazmat suits and wooden crates in cargo nets labeled Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, and behind them, protesters with signs, one reading, "Imported monkeys bring deadly diseases." The news conference was held by PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Lisa Jones-Engel is the group's Primate Experimentation Senior Science Advisor.
I'm going to share evidence that reveals why PETA is calling on the Department of Health and Human Services to end the importation of monkeys into the U.S. laboratories. The CDC's own data show that tuberculosis-infected monkeys imported from Southeast Asia and Mauritius made it through federal quarantine and into U.S. laboratories, carrying multiple strains of TB, including a strain that we have never seen before here in animals. A new peer-reviewed CDC paper, quietly published behind a paywall, confirms this. Tuberculosis sickens 10 million people and kills 1 1/4 of them every year. It's the world's leading cause of death from a single infectious agent, according to the World Health Organization. This deadly disease is coming into the U.S. and, ironically, going into the laboratories that are supposed to be curing diseases. Now, TB is not just a monkey disease, or not just, pardon me, TB is not just a human disease. Monkeys are bridge hosts, capable of cross-species transmission, shedding the mycobacteria through their breath, their saliva, their urine, their feces. Every infected monkey flown into the U.S. threatens to not only expose humans, but also cattle, other domestic animals, and even wildlife, magnifying the danger far beyond the confines of the laboratories. The CDC claimed that between 2013 and 2020, virtually no TB-infected monkeys entered U.S. quarantine. But between 2021 and 2024, their own data showed that 69 infected monkeys arrived on 17 separate shipments. Each year, the number of shipments increased with infected animals. Even worse, the CDC's quarantine missed nearly 1 in 5 infected monkeys. Half of those missed animals came from shipments where another monkey had already tested positive. You don't need to be an epidemiologist to see the recklessness of this.
Lisa Jones-Engel, PETA Primate Experimentation Senior Science Advisor at today's news conference outside the Health and Human Services Department. You're listening to Washington Today. New York Post writes, while President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky work to set up a bilateral Russia-Ukraine summit, Moscow is making new demands that could cancel out the White House's recent successes in seeking an end to the deadliest conflict in Europe since World War II. Moscow's latest foot-dragging includes demands for veto power over security guarantees the U.S. and Europe would provide Kyiv, and specific conditions for a summit between the Russian and Ukrainian leaders. Russian Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov claimed Wednesday the Kremlin tyrant Vladimir Putin only agreed to thinking about raising the level of heads of delegations from previous talks in Istanbul if certain requirements are met. Reporting from the New York Post, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was in Amman, Jordan today for a diplomatic mission. Here is part of a news conference where he talks about Russia's position on the security guarantees when it comes to Ukraine.
We absolutely cannot agree with the fundamental idea that significant security issues, particularly those concerning collective security, are now being proposed to be resolved completely without the direct and essential involvement of the Russian Federation. That will not work. We have explained on more than one occasion, and indeed we have reiterated this point numerous times, that the Russian Federation does not in any way overstate its legitimate national interests or its strategic objectives. But we will firmly and strictly defend our legitimate interests. I am confident that in the West, and above all in the United States, they fully understand that seriously discussing security issues without the Russian Federation is a utopia, a road to nowhere.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at a news conference in Jordan. Kyiv Post has an article. As of Wednesday, August 20th, 10 nations, including France and the United Kingdom, have reportedly voiced openness to deploy troops to Ukraine as part of the post-war security guarantees. The purpose of the security guarantees is to prevent a future Russian invasion of Ukraine, suggesting that Moscow be involved in providing these guarantees or having a say on how they're implemented effectively implies a demilitarized Ukraine. The neutral status of Ukraine, including demilitarization, was one of Moscow's initial war goals when it launched the 2022 invasion. That was from Kyiv Post. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff was on Fox News Tuesday night talking about what a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine might include.
President Sean has said that the Ukrainians actually can make a peace deal if they want to. Now, we're not suggesting that they have to take it. The president has also said it's going to be for President Zelensky to make that judgment call. And I think that judgment call is all going to be, it's going to begin with security guarantees. They want to make sure that this can never happen again to them. And that's exactly how they ought to be thinking. So, but it's our job to bring the parties together, to narrow the issues. And that's what President Trump does better than anybody. He's got a real sense. I mean, he's got a real sense of what it's going to take for Ukraine to meet in the middle and to move the Russians, and he accomplished that in 2 back-to-back meetings. And I watched in wonderment, to tell you the truth, because it was his show.
U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff Tuesday night on Fox News. A Fox News article today begins that 2 German warplanes were scrambled overnight from Romania after Russia launched a large-scale missile and drone attack in Ukraine less than a mile from the NATO borderline. In the Mideast, while Israel has said it will decide by Friday whether to accept the latest ceasefire proposal agreed to by Hamas, there's a story today from Reuters, a widely condemned Israeli settlement plan that would cut across land which the Palestinians seek for a state received final approval on Wednesday, according to a statement from Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. And from ABC News, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard announced Wednesday that her office will cut nearly half its workforce and consolidate several intelligence centers as part of a sweeping restructuring initiative called ODNI 2.0. The overhaul, billed as the largest reform since the office was created after the September 11 terrorist attacks, is expected to save taxpayers more than $700 million annually while refocusing ODNI on its core role of integrating and overseeing the intelligence community, officials said. Reporting from ABC News. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.